Hello everyone, my name is Rajat Dandekar and I welcome all of you to this AI Researcher Bootcamp. In this series, I'll be taking you through what it is to read research papers, how to start reading research papers, and how to identify gaps in the literature, and finally, even try to publish your own research papers in the field of AI. I'll be assuming very little or up to no background in the field of AI, and I'll be reading research papers as a beginner. The objective of this course would be to help you understand how to read research papers, how to summarize the key findings, how to identify gaps in the literature, and then finally how to start writing your own research papers. So, I'm starting this journey along with you, and I'll be reading several research papers as we go along. Every single video will be focused on reading one research paper. You'll get to understand how a researcher reads a paper. So it will be extremely valuable for you. And I welcome all of you in this journey. Let's dive right in. The paper that I'll be reading today is called Constructing Dreams Using Generative AI. It is almost a 7 to 8 pages paper, and I was hooked onto the paper because of its title. So I really want to understand what it means to be able to construct dreams using generative AI. So first, let's try to get a gist of what we are trying to learn as a part of this paper by reading the abstract. So in this paper, what the authors have done is that they have exposed 34 high school students to a bunch of generative AI applications, and they have asked them to create their imagined future dreams while also trying to understand the potential benefits and the harms of generative AI tools in the process. So, as I was reading this, I was trying to imagine the different generative AI apps that I've used. Uh, ChatGPT being the most common, followed by Midjourney. Uh, uh, the thing that hooks me onto this paper is that how can a student use these tools to create their imagined future dreams and then also understand about the potential benefits and the harms of the generative AI tools. So, looks quite fascinating, especially in the current times. We know that generative AI is probably going to play some role in the classrooms of the world as we go ahead. But let's try to explore a bit deeper into what are the different aspects which might be affected. So, we start with the introduction, and the first paragraph of the introduction really tries to teach us about what is the meaning of generative artificial intelligence. So, the difference from traditional classification type of problems uh, when it comes to generative AI is that what you're doing here is that you're training the algorithm based on an existing set of text and images, and the output that you're getting is not in terms of probability, but it's a completely new text or a new image which the algorithm is trying to generate. That is the meaning of generative artificial intelligence, and we have already seen that there are apps which are coming out to create a bunch of text, images, videos, 3D models, etc. um, the application to protein folding was quite interesting. So I have just made a note in my mind regarding this. OpenAI's ChatGPT came around December 22, and it amassed 100 million users in a quite short span of time. Quite interesting. Okay, so what about the next paragraph? Let's move on to the next paragraph. Here they are talking about the advantages of generative AI, where the barriers to creative expressions are significantly reduced. We have already seen this with the usage of ChatGPT. It can be used for a wide range of creative purposes. At the same time, they can also be used for some negative purposes, and the way they have written it down is quite interesting. Ethical concerns such as ownership and copyright data security, plagiarism, generation of fake information, and the spread of misinformation. Here, the topic of copyright interests me a lot because you never know whenever the AI is generating any new thing, which existing work is it using. It's not cited. Recently in an interview we also saw that the CTO of OpenAI was not aware what was the source of the data for its new application Sora. So I've made a note of this as well, that these applications uh, have ethical concerns, including copyright in particular. They can have effect on creative careers. Yes, they can reduce the number of jobs that are available out there in the market. Of course, that also depends on the number of new jobs that it will create eventually in the future. So it still remains a matter to be debated about. Okay. Now, in the in this paragraph, they also relate this to how K-12 students, which means students who are studying below their 12th standard, they have little understanding of how these tools work. And there have been few efforts designing curricula and learning materials for these students. So this is quite interesting. I have made a note in my mind that this is something which is uh, like a gap in the existing field out there. Not a lot of school students are familiar with the different generative AI tools, and there is not a curriculum which is currently developed which can actually uh, introduce students to the proper use of generative AI algorithms at a young age. Now, the next paragraph is particularly fascinating for me because there are a number of things which the authors mention here. Firstly, uh, I, I would like you to focus on these 3 points. So they talk about when a student is asked to create something, let's say create a future version of the student, it allows them to express their self identity, and it allows them to share something which otherwise might not have been possible using only words. So let's say I dream of becoming a scientist in the future, and I'm not able to express it to my friends, to my parents, but using these applications I can actually create an image where I can show a rocket, I can show myself, and I can use all the different prompts which can make the figure very closely representing what I really want to do in the future. The third point is, of course, interesting because it raises the question of the societal and ethical implications of generative algorithms. They have used Dream Studio by Stability AI. So this is interesting. I have not used this particular platform before. Now, the last thing that they focus on in the introduction is the creative, the technical, and the ethical learning objectives. The creative learning objectives would be to teach the students how to write appropriate prompts in the generative AI tools. The technical objectives would be understanding the abilities and the limitations in the current algorithms. The point number four is really interesting. It tries to focus upon how the patterns in the generated images are really a reflection of the patterns in the underlying data set. So for example, let's say if let's say people of specific color um, are given a lot of importance in the training data, that becomes a pattern which is reflected in the output. So whichever image that you want to generate will be biased towards people who are white, or let's say people who are fair looking, or whichever pattern was used in the training data. White is just as an example. Then ethical learning objectives, potential harms we have already touched upon: algorithmic bias, copyright infringement, creation of fake media. Again, algorithmic bias is something which is super interesting because recently we saw Gemini AI being a victim of this algorithmic bias. It's really hard to escape it because a lot of the data out there is completely biased, and that is reflected in these applications. Now what I want to do is that I would like to make some notes about what we have learned in the introduction. So firstly, application to protein folding, that was quite interesting. Ethical concerns pertaining to copyright infringements, again super interesting. Possible gap in literature, structured K to 12 curriculum focusing on proper use of generative AI algorithms. And let's see, what else did we look at? Yes, Dream Studio, try it out. And then finally, using Gen AI as a means to explore and express one's identity. So, if I'm reading the introduction of this paper, I would really keep these points in mind before I move ahead. Okay, so let's go to the next section. The next section which gives us a background of generative AI. So, generative AI is an example of types of algorithms that learn from patterns of existing data and generate a novel data. And one thing that was interesting to me is that these algorithms have long existed. They have already been existing. People are of the impression that this is something which has very recently come up, but it is only through a series of efforts that researchers have done in the past that we are seeing um, uh, the usage of generative AI applications which are directly made available to consumers. Yes, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Stability AI, Midjourney, all of these are extremely popular. Okay, so this we have already covered in the introduction. Let's go to the next paragraph, which talks about literature for generative AI for school students and constructionism. So there is an AI for K-12 national initiative which establishes five big ideas. I have not read this paper. I have made a note of it. It looks interesting to me. Uh, and it gives a background of school students who have been exposed to different generative AI algorithms. So it says students learn to generate text and images and could articulate benefits and harms of generative AI for our society, and their outputs can be used in various creative fields using including creative arts, businesses, and scientific research. So this word constructionist learning approach is fascinating to me. I did not know about this before, and it means the importance of engaging in conversation with one's own and others' artifacts. So it means that you are discussing with other students about your own identity through the means of generative AI applications. Again, the example of scientists and the rocket that I gave previously would make sense here. Just to take another example, let's say you want to become an artist in the future, and as a school student, you are not able to express that out loud. So, what the constructionist learning approach says that you can discuss with your peers about this by using generative AI applications to express what you are really trying to say. And you can be very creative here, not with actual drawing, but with the prompt that you are using to create that particular drawing. Again, it talks about identity construction in the next paragraph, which identifies technical education as a powerful avenue for identity construction. Uh, I try to relate this with my own learning. Um, so, honestly, my identity was nurtured not because of any technical usages in particular, but uh, mainly through the interactions I had with other people and the teachings that I was given. But this is a new approach where you try to construct your identity by using some technical tools, which is quite interesting. Now, this paragraph is draws upon some very interesting features of generative AI applications. So it says that whenever you're trying to write a prompt to get something out of an application, let's say Mid Journey uh, or ChatGPT, you might not always be satisfied with the results that you are getting, and it's because of many different things. So, firstly, every single word is mapped with a visual feature. For example, if I want to create something of a Disney style, then maybe you see something represented as a colorful white strokes and friendly cartoons. So, in the training data that was used to create this particular mapping, Disney got mapped with colorful white strokes and friendly cartoons. So, this was something new. I did not know this before. Then, whenever you write sinking, it is probably related to an unmentioned water environment, uh, which was not mentioned in the prompt before, but just because you wrote sinking in the prompt, you saw a water body in the output. And then it makes sense because that was a pattern in the training data, which eventually got reflected in the output from the generative AI algorithm. The next one is also quite new for me. It says that whenever you write a prompt, some words get a priority compared to other words. For example, if I write writer, painter, and a cobbler, uh, maybe painter is represented at the top. You can't get something which is a mix of all three. So, whichever one is the most prominent is going to be represented. And then stereotypes, if you write doctor, most probably it will get represented as a white man because of existing biases. These are examples of algorithmic biases, which we also saw in the introduction section. Now, the next paragraph again talks about identity construction for technical learning, which we have already touched upon before. So, from this next section, which is the background, what we really understand is the first point is usage of uh, constructionist learning approach, then algorithmic bias inherent in the Gen AI application, then how some words are linked with something which was never intended in the prompt. For example, doctor might be represented by a white man. So, and then before that, of course, we saw how Gen AI background has been around for years. Okay, so let's move on to the next section now, which is the methodology of this particular study. So, they have taken a set of 17 and 21 students in total. The 17 students were from MIT in the US, the 21 students were from Mumbai, India. And the responses of these students were recorded. The students from India, they used the applications in an online mode, so their responses were recorded online. The duration was designed to be totally 1 hour and 20 minutes. The students were initially asked if they were familiar with Gen AI tools, to which most of them replied that yes, they were familiar with ChatGPT but not with other tools. My experience interacting with school students has been exactly the same. Surprisingly, ChatGPT has reached the remotest of areas in India, which is quite interesting, and uh, it really tells how a startup can impact the world at a much larger scale. Uh, then the researcher tried to explain how Gen AI algorithms are different from traditional classification algorithms, wherein you're trying to create something new in the case of Gen AI applications, which does not exist previously in the training data. Then the researcher used seven different tools to make the students understand the applications of Gen AI. They used it to create lesson plans, visual art with diffusion models, creating or a, or collaborating with a music generation algorithm to co-create music. I have not used this personally. Creating videos from movie scripts, I have not done this either. I'm not sure if it's good enough to do that yet. Creating novel protein structures that bind to insulin receptors, quite interesting. Creating concepts for advertisement campaigns, and creating deepfakes. I have made a note in my mind that I should learn how to create music gen algorithms to co-create music, as well as how to create videos from movie scripts. And then finally reflecting on the implications. For example, what are the limitations of these generative AI tools? Students were also asked this very interesting question of who 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 do they think should get the monetary benefit from selling the artwork. uh, the artwork is obviously inspired from an already existing artwork, so should the monetary benefit go to the people who have designed the AI platform? Should it go to the artist, or should it go to the user who has generated the artwork? And then finally, some examples of algorithmic bias, which is probably present in this Gen AI tools, was discussed. Now, the action that was given to them was, you have to construct a dream. If you could be anything in the future, go anywhere, do anything, what would you be doing? So it was done in a scaffolded manner. They were asked the questions like, what do you look like in this dream? Where are you located? What are you doing that represents this dream? What are some visual features that you would like to represent in this dream, etc. So this is an example of a scaffolding approach where students are given different ideas of how they can construct their dream. So this actually hooked me onto this paper because I have not seen a student constructing a dream in their mind and then using any AI application to recreate that dream. It is actually very interesting. And then of course they were asked to share the dreams with other students, which seems to be a manifestation of the constructionist approach that we discussed in the introduction and the background section. And they were asked to reflect on what they learned. For example, how are these Gen AI models useful? What are the positive uses? What are the negative uses? How can these be used in the classrooms? And do you think generative AI should be used for solving assignments? These are all questions where I believe the society is really somewhere where we are at the cusp of moving into a different zone when it comes to education. So right now we are in a sort of a gray area where we are trying to answer these questions, but soon there will be policies in schools where these things will probably be a bit more generalized and fixed in the future. uh, okay, so next we go on to the results. Okay, so what were the results of this particular study? So before going that, let's write down some of the things that we learned in the methods. So two groups of students, and then they were asked to construct a dream, scaffolding approach. Some of the applications that were new to me are music generation, video generation using script. Then they were asked to, of course, share their dreams and reflect on their dreams. What is interesting here was that responses of the students to usages of ChatGPT in classrooms or for solving the assignments. Okay, so these are the main points that we have noted down after reading the methodology section. After this, we are going to move towards the results section where we'll try to understand what are the results that the researchers got after this study. So let's see what the results are. Uh, okay, so let's look at this figure first. Many of the students had dreams such as a Vietnamese male wearing a dark casual academy outfit doing research on psychology in the library with a lot of books. This looks like a cartoonish style. A young and a small Asian girl with black hair and fair but not white skin, wearing an extra large lab coat with a rocket in one hand, etc. My guess is that the student has written not white skin because the platform was maybe reproducing white skin again and again because of an algorithmic bias, and the student had to specifically include this in the prompt. If you remember, this was not a part of the scaffolding, but the student has improvised and written some things over here which try to take this picture as close as possible to their dreams. The third one looks like a realistic rendering style. An Indian girl who is a photographer in the forest with a camera shooting a documentary wearing cargo pants, high detail in illustration style. So I hope you get uh, the main objective of this study was to construct a dream and then to write prompts where the dreams are actually visualized through the generative AI algorithm. So the students they came up with many different images like the ones which are showed in figure 1. Some of the students mentioned the advantages of using these applications, like when I have difficulty explaining what I'm thinking to someone else, I can just use this. Some students mentioned that it's not really art and you're cheating from real artists, which we again come back to in the next section. Remember the question that we had asked, who should monetarily benefit from the sale of an AI generated art? Students have a wide range of creativity. Students says someone says that it should go to the coder who made the algorithm. Some other person says that it shouldn't be used or sold at all because it's taking from other people's art without getting their permission. It feels like stealing. Me personally, I agree with this second student. Then majority of the students express that the company or the person that designed the AI should get the money from the artwork. So there are three different options. Let me know in the comments what you also think should be, who should get monetarily benefited from these AI generated arts. What was interesting for me in this particular section was that the students are forced to think about the ethical concerns of generating an art like this. Of course, deep fake is something which the students are aware about because uh, we get a lot of examples these days of fake images and fake videos where uh, people who are not existing are often made to say something or write something. Now, this is curious to me. Some of the students said that the advantages of deep fake would be to speak to ancestors who have passed away or to speak to their younger versions. Uh, now, this really uh, forces me to think from the point of view of a student who could imagine how the deep fake can be used to speak to an ancestor who have passed away, maybe to uh, probably relive some of their experiences that they have had, or to speak to the younger versions of themselves. Uh, yeah, so this is something which was pretty new for me, and it's kind of fascinating as well. Again, expressing imaginations through generative AI is something that was the main objective of this particular this particular project. And as we already guessed, students started with the scaffolding questions provided, but they eventually deviated and added more details or removed details that are better suited for their goal. Uh, right. So let's move to the next section, sharing the dreams, exploring the art of prompt engineering. So one student mentioned that the generated image was highly accurate, whereas another student said I had to play around with the details and emphasized the styles. Every picture has a different vibe to it. One student said that he wanted to write a Hispanic boy with curly hair in a minion suit, and the tool generated a minion face with curly brown hair, but he expected a boy with a minion space suit. So he kept tweaking until he got finally something like this, which looks similar to a minion suit as well. And then they also mentioned about the visual features should be high detail and in 4K. Uh, so students added details to their appearance and the setting to better reflect aspects of the dream. Some of the students also wrote negative prompts to indicate features which they wanted to omit. So students were understanding how to tweak the prompts. They were essentially learning the art of prompt engineering in the process. Uh, yes, all students in W2 were trying to represent a similar ethnicity, which is not the default representation in Dream Studio. For example, students specifically mentioned that South Indian and the skin tone, or say Pakistani instead of Indian, because when we write Indians, it used to confuse with Native Americans. So if you write Pakistani, that confusion would not be there. Then a student mentioned about writing Indian words such as lehenga to get to the desired depiction. Another student commented something quite interesting, how writing pretty girl always used to depict a young white face, which is a perfect example of algorithmic biases and stereotypes being amplified through the generative AI algorithm. So you have to specifically then mention the color of the face, etc. Um, Seeing students interacting with these applications would have been quite interesting for these researchers as well. And of course, they developed prompt engineering skills and they understood the meaning of algorithmic bias as well. One thing that I'm slightly skeptical in this study is that the researchers had 80 minutes, and within 80 minutes, they have tried to make the students understand the art of prompt engineering, algorithmic biases. I'm not quite sure if the particular point of correlating patterns in the data set with the patterns in the generated output was emphasized enough, especially given the point constraint. Some of the students expressed their opinions that AI still has a far way to go. It doesn't look like human level yet. Some students mentioned AI cannot be emotional as well. Uh, Students were discussing how AI should be used in the classrooms. So most of them unanimously agreed that generative AI should not be permitted in the classrooms for students to solve their homeworks. And copyright infringement is definitely not right, and there should be some policies which should either explicitly mention that this art was generated using generative AI, or somehow uh, give the right recognition for the artist whose art was being used by the platform. Uh, let's try to write down what we have learned through this section. So through the results section, what the students have learned is that the art of generative AI, discussion regarding monetary benefits from uh, AI generated artwork. Next, we have deep fake reconnect with old people, younger self. Make note of this application. Looks pretty interesting. Um, then algorithmic bias, which we saw. Pretty girl, Indian being connected to Native American, sharing of the dreams, uncovering or realizing one's identity, and realizing that AI is not there yet in terms of sophisticated artwork. Um, okay, so this was the entirety of the paper. In the discussion section, again, they have gone through um, what exactly the students have learned. Now, in the future work, what they have mentioned is that this work presents an early study where high school students are introduced to generative AI tools, and a longer workshop with a formal assessment for students is required to make inferences about the efficiency of the learning materials. Uh, this is an area where I'll also be on the lookout for how the generative AI landscape evolves in our classrooms. I have already made a note of how constructing dreams might uncover a lot of things in the student's mind and help them understand a variety of things. For example, algorithmic biases, importance of training data, how the patterns in the training data are reflected in the patterns of, or even sometimes amplified in the generative AI platforms, prompt engineering, how to tweak the prompts to get the right kind of image, engaging them in debates about ethical concerns, copyright infringements in particular. So this was the paper, and I found this super interesting. I learned a lot of things which I've summarized in this article.